toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of Guidance. Amen. So let me share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see the screen there and pretty full? All right, great. Let me get on the right page here. All right, so this actually marks our 5th class in this series. So chugging right along, 5 months in. Kind of exciting that we've been able to kind of keep this thing going, and very excited to be offering a similar version of this to the broader Inayatiyya community through the Astana in October. So more information will come about that, but we're going to be doing this on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. In October as well. Probably be a little bit different version of what we're doing here. I think we're going a little deeper here, and the other will be a little different. We'll have some special guests and a few different things that we're going to do, surprises that we'll pull out for the other one. But very excited about today's class about the Warrior Ethos. So I'm going to kind of recap a little bit about what we've covered over the last 4 weeks and how that ties into today. But a little about the Warrior Ethos, what it is, how the 40 rules help us to forge that Warrior Ethos, a little bit about the inner journey that takes place during this process, and then a little bit about living in that Warrior Ethos with our closing. So, as I mentioned, this is class, I said class 4 here, it's actually class number 5. Over the last 4 months, we've explored many facets of the inner transformation that accompanies this practice of reciting the 40 rules of the Knighthood of Purity that were given to us by Piro Murshid Hazrat Nayak Khan. And we started off our first class, an introduction to the Knighthood of Purity and to the path of knighthood, you know, kind of what this process is and what it entails and what people can expect and kind of what the end goal is to become a Knight of Purity. And then class number 2, we focused on the process of purification. So being the Knighthood of Purity, I felt that purification was a pretty important place to start. And so we worked with the 5 elements breaths and purification, and then also with the phrase Astaghfirullah, and how that ties into forgiveness and forgiving ourselves and working through some of our own internal things. And we also talked a little bit about the concept that we talk about in Sufism a lot of polishing the mirror of the heart, and how that purifies and cleans away the rust and gives us a pure reflection of the light within. Our third class really focused on the practice of the 40 rules to bring us barakah and risk. And this is, you know, kind of a element of bringing us blessing. You know, what are the gifts that we get from these practices? Because they do bless us, and it's a practice, and it's definitely something that becomes work. You know, it's something we have to give our energy and our time and our attention to. Our consciousness needs to be focused on it, but I think a lot of us do it with hopes to receive something from it as well, rather than just to have the practice and do it. So we really focused on what kind of blessing and what kind of providence came to us through the process of doing the 40 rules. And then last class, we talked about the tenets of chivalry from ancient times to their modern Renaissance. So a little bit about some of the early chivalric practices, a lot of the medieval and European, you know, chivalry, and also in Islam, a lot of how the knighthood and chivalric path unfolded there. And I did kind of skip over a little bit. Also, feudal Japan had a lot of chivalric activity as well. I actually just finished an audio book for the Book of Five Rings, which is written by a samurai warrior, and he spoke about the different methods of training and the warrior aspect and how that played into the protection of the clans and the emperors and the lower classes and things like that, much as we do in our own chivalric path. So just wanted to pay homage to that legacy as well, and we'll probably get into that more. But that kind of inspired me today to really jump into the warrior ethos a little bit more, listening to the different qualities of the warrior and how to, really parry against your enemy in different ways and work with their energy. And I've actually studied martial arts for quite a few years. I was really involved with it 20 plus years ago when I lived back in Ohio. And then when I first moved to Los Angeles, I found an instructor who had learned from a gentleman named Dan Inosanto, and Dan Inosanto was Bruce Lee's training partner. And he was actually the Filipino stick fighter in a lot of the Bruce Lee movies and things. So I was really inspired by him, obviously, being into martial arts, and I felt really privileged to be so close to the source there with that training. Ironically, too, I was training with him around the same time that I met Tasneem, and so I felt like, here I'm, a couple steps away from Murshid, through this lineage of her learning from Pir Vilayat, and then training with my trainer who trained with Dan Inosanto, who was Bruce Lee's training partner. So very fortunate when I moved to California to land in some influential circles in both of those areas of my life. So kind of fast forwarding to today, I wanted to really step into a little bit more about this warrior ethos and what it means and kind of how it unfolds. When we think of knighthood and we think of being a knight in general, there is that element of combat that's there. There's that, that's really what a knight was a fighter, a warrior, a protector. And when we think about, what it takes to forge yourself into that warrior mentality and that fighting spirit and bring that out of yourself, it is an ethos. It's a mentality. It's a mindset. It's something that you have to really craft and forge and bring in to yourself and into your being. So want to dive into that today. And so on this new class today, we're going to move into that new phase of action and actualization. So we've talked a lot about the backgrounds of things. We've talked about a lot of the historical references. We've talked about some of the gifts and the things that we receive from the practice. But this is really starting a new phase of, over the next few classes, really moving into the action and actualization of how these rules really help us and are used to build that warrior ethos and provide strength to carry out the inner battle with the nafs, or the ego self.
I'm in here.
And we begin where we left off in the last class, by embodying the poem that Murshid gave us called Riding on the Horse of Hope. So we kind of ended our class kind of touching upon that a little bit last week or last month, and taking some of that into practice by maybe visualizing the sort of self-respect, or the different elements of consciousness and courageousness that come from that poem itself, which this really serves as a perfect image of the spiritual warrior journeying to the land of love. So we will begin to take the reins and go on the ride here a little bit. Let me switch. Okay, so we'll just read through the poem here, and you might just close your eyes or just focus your breath and really take in the words and really let the imagery kind of fall across your mind as we read through this poem. And again, this really is, I think, the blueprint and the kind of the backbone of Murshid's vision for the knighthood of purity. It's not really laid out as the rules and things like that, but I think this is the overall ethos, which we'll get into, of what Murshid had for his vision for this activity. Riding on the horse of hope, holding in my hand the rein of courage, clad in the armor of patience, and the helmet of endurance on my head, I started on my journey to the land of love. A lance of stern faith in my hand, and the sword of firm conviction buckled on. With the knapsack of sincerity and the shield of earnestness, I advanced on the path of love. My ears closed to the disturbing noise of the world, my eyes turned from all that was calling me on the way, my heart beating the rhythm of my ever-rising aspiration, and my blazing soul guiding me on the path. I made my way through the space. I went through the thick forests of perpetual desire. I crossed the running rivers of longing. So obviously a lot of visuals here and a lot of things to really pick apart and to really look at. Last month we spoke a little bit about this lance of stern faith, and in my own experience and just meditations and walks on the trails, I've really this last month really held on to that lance of stern faith and the sword of firm conviction. Those have been two that really stuck with me and were part of my practice over the last month. You think of the lance, as something that is out before you. A lance is a long, pole or stick that would kind of precede the horse and the rider, and kind of be the first point of contact with the enemy or the adversary, if you will. And so thinking of faith as something that walks before us, that carries out in front of us, having this faith is something that's projected out as almost a shield of protection, but something that really stands before you and kind of reaches whatever adversary comes your way. It kind of reaches it before we get there, right? So this faith, or this lance of stern faith, has been a really strong one for me, and a sword of firm conviction, really standing firm in your conviction, whatever it might be, situational or spiritual. I know that for me, being on this particular path, the experiences that I've had, without sounding too weird, I guess you would say the visitations that I've had through the Silsila, the connections to some of the saints and masters of our path, have really given me this firm conviction that I have, landed in the right path, and that it's helped me to kind of reconcile some of my issues with past religious beliefs or other, religious dogmas that I grew up with, and helped me to integrate those and understand those and return to, the Christ consciousness, the love of, Christ and biblical passages, things like that I had pushed away from for a long time. So that sword of firm conviction is something that really has stuck with me. And when you kind of get down in here a little bit farther, where we talk about the journey, and Murshid says here, my heart beating the rhythm of my ever-rising aspiration. So that pulse of what you aspire to be and what you aspire to achieve through the rules and through the practice, is that rhythm that sets a pulse that beats, in your heart. And I love this, my blazing soul guiding me on the path. And I can just, see Murshid on a horse with this blazing, soul of his, being, guided on the path and, raising his hand and calling out, Ya Hadi, and feeling this like incredible pull of guidance, just kind of directing his path. That's a great visual in my mind when I read this poem. So let's get in a little bit to the what is an ethos. So ethos is a Greek word meaning character that is used to describe the guiding beliefs or ideals that characterize a community, nation, or ideology, and the balance between caution and passion. I think there's a real key there, that an ethos is finding a balance between caution and passion. Etymologically speaking, ethos in Greek originally meant an accustomed place, as in the habits of horses or custom or habit, equivalent to the Latin mores. Ethos, from the roots of ethikos, means morality, showing moral character. So we can see from the word's roots that ethos refers to the creation of a custom or habit that relates directly to our mortality and our morality. So ethos is, this creation of habit. It's creating something that we're accustomed to, this space or place that becomes a custom. And it directly relates to morality and the moral character. A warrior is a guardian specializing in combat or warfare, especially within the context of a tribal or clan-based warrior culture society that recognizes a separate warrior aristocracy, class, or caste. Now, in the Sufi practice of Futuwa, the battle is not about fighting people, but it's the inner battle with the nafs, the ego self, while showing courage, service, and love in the world. Therefore, the warrior ethos is one by which one specializes in a form of combat or warfare which focuses on forging customs or habits that guard the morality of the individual, class, or caste. It's the forging of the inner metal that becomes the very pillar of strength by which the battle with the inner self is won. The forging of this ethos requires repeated action, focused towards the aim as to create in oneself a habit or that accustomed place in which the strength and might to carry one through the battle of the ego firmly resides. So through this process of doing these 40 rules and doing the daily practice, it's a forging. And I've used this word in previous classes, but to forge something, when you think of a blacksmith or a steel worker forging a sword or forging some sort of shield or a helmet or something, it's this process of, putting the metal in the fire so that it changes the density of it to where it softens it to where it can be molded and it can be shaped into a form that can be utilized and used for its intended purpose. And so it's this forging that we're doing. So we are essentially, through these 40 rules, throwing ourselves into the fire and softening that metal in a way that we can forge it and mold it into something that is more enlivened, more lightened, that carries this strength that will help us through our battle with the ego, and ultimately to create this warrior within that can work through and strive through the difficulties of life so that we can be of service and so that we can be guardians and protectors, not only of our own self and our families and things, but of our nations, our our friends, our different groups that we come in contact with in life, and ultimately of the soul, right? Guardians of our soul, and what it is that we hope to achieve in this experience. So, looking at the 40 rules as the forge, as this fire that kind of forges us into and molds us into what we are trying to aspire to be as a knight of purity. Each stage of working with the 40 rules takes us through 4 particular degrees of training that literally transforms one's character through repetition and refinement, forging the warrior ethos that ultimately culminates in the realization of expression of the warrior spirit in the form of the Knight of Purity. Each progression of the rules represents a particular quality of substance that refines the individual, molding their inner understanding of how their outward expression transforms their environment, and how the transmutation of the spirit from the denseness of the ego-driven self to the highly polished refinement of the inner light brings forth the divine qualities that ultimately align one with the higher states of being. So we really are, aiming for not just an accolade as a, Iron Herald, Copper Herald, Silver Herald, Golden Herald, or Knight, but this striving towards this knighthood of purity ultimately is to align us with our highest states of being. It's molding us and crafting us into a consciousness where we can be of service at our highest capacity. So I really love that thought that, we're forging this warrior ethos in a way and in a manner that ultimately aligns us with higher states of being. And that really is the alchemical process and the transformation that takes place in this practice. And kind of taking a look to start here at those 4 particular degrees of training. So I'm sure this was somewhat what Murshid put together intentionally, and maybe it was just kind of a natural progression and flow. As I talk a lot about alchemy and called this the Alchemy of Knighthood because the process of alchemy was about, on the surface anyway, was about transforming base metals into gold, transforming iron into copper and then refining it further to where it takes on the quality of silver, and then from there to gold. And you see these images and pictures of these scientists or these mystics in a laboratory with different chemicals and mixing beakers together to try to transform and change something from one substance to another. And that on the outside looks like a physical process of using a material substance to create another more valuable material substance. But all of that is metaphor for the inner transformation, and what the alchemical process truly was transforming us through these different particular grades and degrees of what these different elements of metal represent. So we've talked about this a lot over the last few classes, but kind of looking at the forge that is created from these different degrees of training. The iron rules and those 10 rules really become the raw foundation. They're really about bringing about honesty, making sure that we're not making false claims, we're not doing harm for personal gain, being faithful in our service. And so this is an unbreakable base. This is something that really creates that foundational work in us to really be that raw foundation where we are forging honesty. We're making sure that we're not making false claims. We're making sure that we're not harming another person to get where we want to go in life and things like that. And really setting the pace for that faithful service, learning to become of service and to be able to serve, and knowing what it means to really be a servant in the right sense. So the iron rules really set this foundational, pattern in us in the beginning of this process of training over these 4 different degrees. The copper rules then are a little bit more conductive. They're a little bit more about building character. So this is where now we've kind of worked through some of the creating of the honesty. We've worked through our false claims. We've made sure that we're checking ourselves so that we're not being of harm to others. We're learning to serve. But now it's time to build the character. So with the copper rules, we start to really see that unfoldment of who we are and how we live and how we represent ourselves, how we represent our spiritual path, and what we offer to, our broader community in the way of who we are and what we give as a person. And this is where we start to see responsibility come into play. We start to see the different levels of politeness. We start to learn how to be more kind and to be more loving and to be more polite and to really be more giving of our service. This is where we strip away malice and any of the anger and the frustration that we normally face life with when situations come up that seem to test our mettle, as I like to say. This is where that malice starts to fall away, or we start to break through it or chip through it, I guess, is a good way to look at it. And then we create this trustworthiness. So again, we've worked through the iron rules to create this foundation of honesty and no false claims and things of that nature. But the copper rules really bring out this quality and this energy of trustworthiness. Now we're forging ourselves to be a trustworthy servant, a trustworthy guardian of the faith, and what we do by wielding our sword and our lance and carrying the armor and working through this process. And then helping without looking down on others. So again, this copper rules also in that character building, as you start to progress through the rules, there is a lot of difficulty, I think, in the beginning. I think a lot of people go through the iron rules and start to see, oh, these are a little more difficult than I thought, or wow, this one really challenged me this 40 days, and now I got to work with the next one, and oh, this one's a lot easier. Okay, great. So you have these different degrees and levels of where you're tested and tried a little bit. But with that can also kind of crack open the ego, because you can get to a point where you feel like, oh yeah, I'm really getting this. This is really working for me, and I'm creating this great warrior ethos. And then you, through that process, might see something reflected in another that feels lesser, or feels like they aren't quite to the degree that you're at, because you've been forging and building and creating and things like that. So this process of the degree of training through the copper rules really challenges us to continue to do this work without looking down on others, and without seeing anyone other than equal to us, and that can be a real challenge as well. So the copper rules really bring out that quality as well. The silver rules then is even about more refinement and about creating a resilience. When you look at silver as a quality, it's more highly refined. It's more resilient. It has a brightness to it. It can be forged into many different things and used for many different purposes. Silver probably has one of the most strongest use cases. We use it in electronics. We use it in medical surgical equipment. It's used for jewelry and for adornment and things like that. But it's a much more refined metal, and it has much more resilience than iron or copper. So this is translated internally to starting to have this sacredness of duty. Seeing our duty to others and our duty to our practice and our duty to our path is something more sacred. It's more refined now. It's not just a process that we do. It's not just a practice. It's not just a thing that we say every morning to make ourselves feel good or to stay on track. It becomes a sense of duty. Pierre Vilayet used to speak a lot about walking the spiritual path as taking a pledge. And I think this is where the pledge comes in to play a lot within these silver rules. These rules become a pledge to take them on as a sacred duty. And that really unfolds a lot through the practice of the silver rules. Using tact, tact in our speech, in our actions, our activity. That's the rule actually that I'm on right now, is to use tact in all occasions. And I know sometimes that can be difficult, and sometimes you can handle a situation with less tact than maybe we should. And so this is a challenge sometimes to tactfully work through conversations where there might be varying opinions, or handle a situation where you have to stand up for something that is right and true, or protect a certain situation, things like that. We live close to a high school, and we have a lot of the young kids from the high school that'll come over and eat their lunches and just throw their trash on the ground, and things like that. And I've become that old man that goes out and, hey, you can't leave that there. So I have to use my tact. Sometimes I want to go out there and be a little harsher and try to be the tough guy, but finding ways to use tact in all occasions is really important. And then also with this comes the self-respect. And Murshid talks about the sword of self-respect, and carrying this sword of self-respect. And I think that's a really important one, is to find a way to respect yourself in a non-egoic way. It's not a looking at yourself lofty, or looking at yourself as this higher, being or person, but to really respect, yourself, both as human and as spirit, because we do go through situations where our human side really comes through. Our frustration, our anger, our difficulties, really are at the forefront. And being able to meet those moments with that sort of self-respect is very important. And then and learning how to then translate that into our everyday life, and to share that self-respect with others, and to be a light unto others, where they can be inspired to respect themselves through your own level of self-respect, I think is another thing that really ties in with the silver rules, because silver has such a reflective quality. It's silver is almost mirror-like if it's finely polished and things of that nature. Having that reflective quality, when you have this self-respect that you're working with, that reflects out, and people can see that, and they can feel that, and then hopefully it inspires them to carry that sort of self-respect within themselves as well. The silver rules also bring that regard for every soul. So learning to understand others, and to find a way to really have that regard for others. I was at one of Pir Zia's offerings. I was probably 10-15 years ago. It may have even just been a pre-recorded thing I watched on YouTube or something of him, but he spoke about when you hear an ambulance or sirens somewhere, just taking that moment to have regard for that soul wherever that ambulance is going. May that person be well, or may they get the treatment that they need, or if it's a police officer going to a situation, may that situation be safely resolved. If it's a fire situation, may that family be protected, may that home be protected. Having that regard for every soul, and that's a very simple thing. A lot of people don't think about it. You hear sirens all the time, and you don't think much of it other than getting off the road and out of the way. But that can be an opportunity to have regard for every soul. And I think we see this so much in Los Angeles too, with homelessness and people that we see on street corners that are struggling and things like that. And we may not have anything in our pocket to give at the moment, but we can have regard for that soul, and we can send them, our thoughts and our well wishes, and a hope for a clearer mind to make better choices, or to, to be freed of addiction, or to be given a safe, passage to a place where they can get help, things like that. So having regard for every soul, I think, is a big one that comes through in the silver rules. And I think in our everyday life, we have a lot of opportunity to have regard for the souls of others. And then not being humbled by adversity. So, this is kind of an interesting one. Usually we think of being humbled as a good thing. And, we definitely want to be humbled by adversity, but we also want to stand firm in what that adversity is there to teach us and to show us. And sometimes adversity is the strongest teacher, and and you can humble yourself to where you overcome it and work through it, but then you don't learn the lesson from it. So I think that this is part of what Murshid speaks when he says to not be humbled by your adversity, is to make sure that you're learning the lesson that comes from it, and make sure that you're diving into it and really seeing what can come through it. Rumi says the remedy is in the pain, or the remedy is in the suffering. And a lot of times that becomes the case, and it's easy to overlook and to walk through something and say, oh great, I overcame that, but not quite take the lesson from it. So I think that there's something in that with the silver rules. And then the golden rules, the highest ideal, what this brings forth, this idea of being golden. And we talk a lot in our meditations about, a golden light coming down through the crown, or the golden thread that connects us to the divine, and things like that. So that golden light becomes the highest ideal. And this is where we really start to learn constancy in our love, not just fly-by-night love, or just loving for the sake of when it feels good or right, but holding love in our hearts for all people, all beings, all life, in a constant manner, and being a reflection of that love. And then upholding honor at any cost. So again, this is where the honorable spirit of the warrior, the protector, the guardian really comes through, because now we've worked through these 3 different particular degrees of training leading up to the golden rules, and now it's about upholding that honor at any cost, and really being that warrior in every facet of life. And then it also is about our generosity. When you have this golden quality, there's a higher value to what you hold in your heart, and maybe even in your pocket at that point. But generosity becomes something that you give, and something that you project, and that you present in your being. This sense of generosity towards others and in your surroundings. And again, it's the reflection that is given off. Having a generous nature and a generous quality is then reflected, and can also be an inspiration for others to be more generous and more kind in their offering as well. And holding your ideal high no matter what. So again, this really ties into the warrior ethos, because no matter what comes your way, if you're in the heat of battle and you're out there and you're fighting for your life, you have to hold your ideal high no matter what. So whatever comes your way, whatever enemy or adversary or extremity comes towards you, you have to be ready to hold firm to your training, to your knowledge, to your understanding, to your convictions, in order to really stand in that truth as the warrior, and as the protector, and as the guardian, and stand for what you're fighting for. And so holding that ideal high no matter what is extremely important. And this really shows how daily recitation of one rule each morning for 40 days slowly molds the person. It's disciplined repetition that forges the warrior's qualities. So over these 4 degrees of training that come through these 4 degrees of the iron rules, copper rules, silver rules, and golden rules, we are crafting this warrior ethos that comes through in these different manners. Now, kind of breaking this apart a little bit deeper, let's look at a few of the specific rules from each set and how they relate to the forging of the warrior ethos. So we read these rules and we work through them daily, and they have certain meaning for us each day. And as you go through the 40 days, one day it might have a totally different meaning for you than it did, the first day. So you might be 10 days in, and it just, whatever you're dealing with or situation is in that moment, it brings you a much richer and deeper understanding of what that rule means to you in that day, as opposed to what it might have meant, 10 days prior or whatever. And so this forging, happens over time. And so again, if you think about the blacksmith again, using the idea of putting the iron in the fire, or putting the metal in the fire and changing its composition to where it can be molded and shaped. It doesn't just go in and, one time it heats up and then you give it a few taps of a hammer and it becomes a sword. No, it's this continual forging, and it's this continual work, and it goes through different phases and different stages. And you might do the same, you might tap the same area several times before it takes the shape that you want it to take. And it may take several movements and several different motions, and it may take a process of stepping back and letting it cool again and then heating it up again in order to really forge it into that specific shape that you want it to forge into. So this is a lot of the process. It's as you go through that 40 days, you're going to have these different levels of ups and downs where that rule is going to transform and transmute and change a lot for you in meaning and in effect over those 40 days. So looking at the iron rules, a couple of those, again, this is our raw, unbreakable foundation that is created through the process of the iron rules. And a few that really stood out: harm no one for your own benefit. Really looking at, we see this a lot, I think, in work and in, commerce and things like that, where we're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, and we're always trying to get ahead, or we want to get that extra promotion, or we want to be extra appreciated by the boss, those types of things. So sometimes in the pursuit of that, it's easy to kind of, step on other people or to brush others aside. And really thinking of this harming no one for your own benefit, I think, is a really important foundation for creating this unbreakable spirit. Do not spare yourself in the work which you must accomplish. That's another really strong one. We sometimes can take the easy path or the easy route, and it spares us work that we have to do to accomplish what we want to do, but it doesn't really doesn't have the same effect as really just kind of working a little extra harder or putting in that extra effort. So not sparing yourself in the work which you must accomplish, I think, is a very important foundation for setting the tone for that warrior ethos. And these rules in particular, all the iron rules, build the basic armor. And again, we talk about the forging, and you think of some of the things that we've talked about in previous classes with Astaghfir Allah, for instance. Astaghfir Allah has within it, etymologically, some of the terminology there refers to the migfar, which is the chainmail that was worn under the helmet of the knight, which or the chainmail vest that's worn, which is an extra layer of protection. It's an inner layer of protection. So you have the outer layer of the armor itself, but then if the armor is pierced or if the armor is cut through, then you have this chainmail, this migfar underneath, which creates that extra layer of protection, which is a little harder to kind of lance through or slice through. So again, this is building that basic armor through some of these practices and the disciplines that we have under integrity and under pressure, that build that discipline and integrity under pressure. with the copper rules, this is again the tempering of the character. So now we're actually kind of forming and tempering our character into something stronger, into something more valuable. And bear no malice against your worst enemy. I think this is a really strong foundational thing for the warrior ethos. And I mentioned in the beginning the Book of the Five Rings and some of the chivalric teachings of the feudal Japan and things of that nature, and a lot of that fighting spirit of the samurai, really held that particular spirit of bearing no malice against their worst enemy. So they fought to win, and they fought to rise up in battle against another. And to win, to fight. And if it meant fight to the death, it meant fight to the death. But they did it with honor, and they did it with a respect for the opponent and with a respectfulness. And we've heard this in different chivalric paths, but and Murshid has spoken about it as well, not striking another in anger. So, if you're in the heat of battle, and you're in a situation where you're up against an opponent, you strike them out of duty and out of necessity for survival, but not out of anger. And there's a particular story. I'm going to totally get it wrong here, but there was a particular story of a gentleman in battle who came upon his opponent and was ready to strike him because he was struck first and cut, and the anger welled up in him, and he was going to strike the enemy, but he stopped, and he didn't strike the opponent. And when asked why he didn't do that, he said, because I welled up with anger, and it's part of my duty to not strike anyone in anger. And so, that's a difficult thing to do, because when anger comes up and especially when you're in a situation where you're defending yourself or defending your beliefs or defending your rights, it's hard not to lash out in anger sometimes. But that's an important thing, is to bear no malice against your worst enemy, and then also to consider your responsibilities sacred. During the copper rules, you're really, again, forging that character, and you're, in the iron rules, we don't spare ourselves in the work which we must accomplish. But by the time you're getting to the copper rules, you're considering your responsibilities sacred. You're realizing how responsible you must be, and for yourself, your actions, for the way that you walk through life, and the way that you treat others, the way that you serve others. And this becomes a sacred duty. And this is where that sacredness of duty and character and the culture of the warrior ethos really starts to come into play. And then, through these copper rules really show the warrior's heart. This is where we start to build the steadiness, the responsibility, and to be free from bitterness. And, the copper is conductive. Copper itself has an electrical conductivity to it. So it's igniting that spark of responsibility, of steadiness, of, this attitude of really being more about being of service and guardianship and protection and things of that nature. The silver rules, again, about refinement and resilience. We see silver being a more refined metal, and this resilient metal that has this reflective quality to it. And through this, we see meet your shortcomings with a sword of self-respect. So I've brought that one up a couple times, but being able to acknowledge your shortcomings and to meet them with a sword of self-respect. So again, honoring them, seeing your difficulties, seeing your shortcomings, and not beating yourself up for it, but having a sense of self-respect where you're cutting through that situation, you're cutting through that difficulty, and through that mentality about yourself and your shortcomings, and realizing that, yes, astaghfirullah, I forgive me for being human in that moment. and allow that spiritual element that you're trying to teach me through this process to come through, and to really help myself meet myself with that sort of self-respect. I think that's a really important thing that comes through the silver rules. And then to not let your spirit be humbled in adversity. So again, this idea of letting your spirit learn and grow from the adversary, or the adversity that we face in everyday life. You know, things come our way sometimes to really teach us something, and if we overlook it too much, or we don't allow ourselves to be transformed and changed by it, then we don't really get the beauty of why it came. And I think a lot of us in life, well, everyone in life has difficult situations that we face all the time, and a lot of times it's easy to just meet it with anger or frustration, or to just humbly, throw our hands up and say, "Screw it." I'm not gonna deal with this. But there's always a lesson to be learned. So taking a moment, and Mersha doesn't say this expressly in the rules or anything, but to take a moment and ask, what is the lesson that I'm supposed to learn from this? What is this teaching me? What is this helping me overcome or work through? Sometimes just taking that moment to do that can really show you what your adversary is there to teach you. And I think that's a really important aspect of the silver rules. And then, these are this is pure warrior language. This is the sword and the unbowed spirit. So these are the things that really are forging that warrior ethos and really culminating in now we are this more highly refined and resilient spirit of the warrior. The golden rules, the highest ideal, teach us to observe constancy in love. And, again, having that sense of love for ourselves, for our community, for our families, for others, and just really holding that constancy in love, and allowing that to be an energy or a spirit that flows through us. Murshid talks about the river of love and some of that in the poem, and when we think about that, I'm sure there's quite a few Rumi poems, and Hafiz, and some of the great poets of the Sufi tradition that has talked about this river of love and this flow of love, and this when you think of constancy in love, it's a flow. It's an ever constant flow that flows through our lives, and sometimes it might be deep, sometimes it might be shallow, sometimes it might be rocky, sometimes it might be rapids and things that might toss us about a little bit, but observing the constancy of the flow of love that works through us as we forge this warrior ethos. Upholding your honor at any cost. So again, this idea of being honorable in our service, and in our service to ourselves, first and foremost, but then our service to our community and to our ideal, and that which we are working to uphold, which leads right to the next one. Hold your ideal high in all circumstances. So again, this striving for this perfection of the self, to strive for this higher consciousness, this higher realization, working towards the highest ideal of our mental being, where we really merge and become one with the divine and don't see ourselves as separate. That really is the ultimate goal, I think, of everything that we do on this spiritual path, is to have this realization and this remembrance that we're not separate from God, that we are God, and we are the ray that's reflected from the light of the sun. It's not separate. It's still the sun. It's just reflected and broken off into a particular ray of light that reflects as us. And to hold that ideal high in all circumstances is such a powerful way to live. and a powerful way to really move through life and its difficulties. So these are the things that crown the knight. These are some of the golden rules, or some of the real crowning jewels of this knighthood practice. Love is the ultimate weapon. Honor is the guiding star. And I love this idea of love is the ultimate weapon, because hate and anger and all those things, they can't survive against love. So sometimes meeting those things with a loving spirit or a reflection of love can really change the energy of what's coming from the other side and what's opposing you in that moment. And honor acting as the guiding star here. So again, having that sense of honor and really holding to that honor can be a focal point. And we talk a lot in a lot of the practices that we do, to kind of mold ourselves and our ability to focus and to concentrate is focusing on a point. We'll find a particular point. I know through my Saluk training and through my representative and coordinator training, we did some practices of finding a point on a wall and just staring at that point and really focusing on that for a while to really focus, build this ability to concentrate and focus in one direction and in one space. And when you have this ideal of honor that you focus on, and everything is directed towards honoring yourself and honoring the higher self and honoring the divine, that ultimate point of honor can really be a guiding star that really helps direct us in that direction. So taking a moment here to link this back to Murshid's vision for the knighthood of purity, and pulling apart some of these ideas that we just spoke about through the 4 levels of the rules, the 4 degrees of training, and how this kind of links back to the poem in the beginning of this class today, which really, again, I think is kind of a foundation for Murshid's vision for this. The journey through trials, riding through forests of desires, rivers of longing, deserts of suffering, and hills of strife. So this is what this path does. Any spiritual path, really, if it's a true spiritual path and you're really on it for the edification of the spirit and to grow as a person and in your character and your being, you're going to be faced with a lot of trials. And so this journey through trials, of riding through the forest of desire, and really thinking of what that means and what that looks like. And then the rivers of longing, the things that flow through us and make us, move maybe sometimes unconsciously. If you think of a river, you can throw something in a river and it can just be carried away and uncontrollably, it's gone. It's way down the river. So this sense of longing, sometimes there's this flow of longing within us that we don't even know where it's going or where it's being directed. It's carrying us somewhere, and being able to kind of find a way to maybe get a little bit of a grasp on the direction, or to steer it in a certain way, or to put a little rudder in the water to give us some direction. That type of thing is a lot of what these rules do for us. Deserts of suffering, we definitely go through the suffering in this process, and then the hills of strife. So the beginning of this journey is a lot of trials, and they continue on throughout the process. They don't just go away, but the journey through the trials is a lot of what this particular path teaches us. The forests of desire, temptation and distraction. The 40 rules really teach the knight to learn discipline and focus. So to, again, having that focal point, that thing that you're aiming towards, the ultimate goal, but then, being able to learn the discipline and the focus to not be distracted by the things that come our way, the things that aggravate us, the adversarial things that hit us in everyday life, you know, the bills, the struggles, the traffic, all the different things that create distraction and also become temptation. And temptation isn't always about sin or about doing wrong or things like that. We can be tempted to react to things in a negative way. We can be tempted to be turned from one sense of belief to another very easily or very quickly. We can be tempted um, to really steer away from what we desire because we've been, kind of distracted by something that tempts us to go in another direction. So this idea of temptation and distraction, and Murshid's poetic way of saying it as the forest of desire, I think really is a really strong visual for us to carry us through when we're thinking about how the knight learns to carry that discipline and focus. And so I love that line, the forest of desire. Rivers of longing. Murshid speaks about that in the poem, and this is where we find a lot of emotional turbulence and yearning. So again, I spoke about the river. Sometimes there's this turbulent water. If you ever been whitewater rafting, you know that you hit some heavy rapids sometimes, and you've got to you get in a situation where you've got to really work together. Everybody in the raft has to work together in order to steer through that situation. And sometimes it's about moving the weight of everyone to one side so that you get around a rock or you get around a dangerous situation. And usually you end up on the other side of that with a boat full of water, and everybody's got to, get little jugs out and clear the water out of the raft and things like that. So it's much the same when we're going through the emotional landscape. There's turbulence and there's different things that we have to do to orient ourselves or to shift our weight or to shift our mentality towards a certain a place in order to navigate through that. And then sometimes we got to bail the water out, and make sure that we don't sink through those situations. But the river of longing really teaches about that emotional turbulence and the yearning. And this is where the knight builds patience and endurance. So through this traveling of the river of longing, you're longing for something and you're reaching for something. And I can even just attest to this just in my desire to be a Sufi guide and teacher. For many years, I wanted to do this, and I felt ready and I felt called, but there was a process, and the process kept getting longer. And every time I thought the football was about to go through the goalpost got moved back a little farther. And this was something that was hard for me, but it did teach me patience and endurance. And I'll tell a funny story here real quick. I think it's kind of relevant. So when I first met Davy Tide over at Tasneem's house, I became initiated into the healing order through a 3-day weekend there, and I wanted to become a healing conductor. And so I had reached out several times and, yeah, I'm ready to do the training. I want to do the training. Oh, yeah, okay, no problem. I'll send you some materials. And so Davy said she was going to send me some materials. And they never came. I didn't get them. And then months would go by, and then I'd reach back out and, hey, I never got those materials. Oh, you didn't? And so this went on for probably, I would say maybe 3 or 4 years. Oh, I can't believe you didn't get those. I sent those to you. You didn't get them yet, and it really it was frustrating to me, but at the same time, my desire to do the work was so strong that I didn't let it affect me, and I kept pursuing it. And it ended up getting to a point where she reached out to me and she says, I'm actually starting to do some, I've been toying with the idea of doing some of this work online and being able to do things with a person one-on-one. And I'm going to take you on as my first one-on-one online healing conductor to train. And so I was the first person that she trained online to be a healing conductor. So she never sent any material. It never got lost in the mail or anything. She was conditioning me and really seeing with her own inner eye if I had the patience and the endurance to get to the point where I was ready to train and ready to complete the training. And that was a strong lesson for me on the path, and maybe a little unorthodox in some ways and methods, but really taught me something about this patience and endurance. So my river of longing got me through and carried me all the way to where I did eventually complete that training and become a healing conductor, and be able to offer some of that work. The deserts of suffering, hardship, loneliness, and tests. So again, this is, the desert. You think of the desert as a harsh place. It's unforgiving in so many different ways. It's giving in a lot of ways as well. There's a lot of beauty. There's a lot of life in a desert, but there is a lot of hardship, loneliness, and tests that come through the desert. And the knight cultivates faith and resilience through this process of kind of being out in the desert, of this practice in this training period. The hills of strife that Murshid speaks about is where we see a lot of conflict, opposition, and struggle. And this is where the knight has to practice sincerity and courage. So the courage to work through these conflicts internally and externally, where we have to fight the opposition, our own opposition against what we're working through and facing, but also opposition from others, and from outer extremities and experiences and things like that. And the struggle that comes from that conflict and opposition. So this is where walking through the hills of strife really teach the knight to practice sincerity and courage. And then we look at the 40 rules as weapons. So we're looking at them as training, and we're looking at them as things that forge us and mold us and shape us and craft us into a higher character of being. But they also are weapons. They are practical tools that forge the patience, the endurance, the faith, and the sincerity for every terrain of life that we come across. So we can look at these as rules and strict and stringent, ideals and ways of living and things like that. But I like the idea of looking at the rules as weapons. These are things that we carry in our tool bag that we can use and wield in certain situations to help us combat mostly the self, and not so much weapons that we use or form against others, but against our own ego and against our own opposition to our own inner self and the struggles and the things that we deal with and things that we face in everyday life that we would consider adversarial. And the ultimate truth that this is the path of love, not force. And I think that this is a really important key point for the warrior ethos. The warrior is about love more than about force. And we talked about this a little bit on the last class about chivalry, and again, I mentioned it at the beginning of this. It's not about, in Futuwa, the Sufi spiritual idea of chivalry. It's not about force. It's not about battling against another person. It's not a fight against others. It's a fight against the inner self. It's a fight against the ego. It's a fight against the things of us and our nature that aren't natural to the divine qualities that we want to uphold and that we want to bring forth. And when we think about the 99 names and the different wazif that we embody, it's not just simply a calling out to something and asking it to come in. It's a opening of that from within, and it's a recognition that quality is already there. It's just hidden under a veil. And so this path of love is about opening, and it's about not forcing our idea or concept or thought on another, but having this pure stream of love that comes through as truth. And this is where the pure knight conquers the self through the heart. So this opening of the heart, this polishing of the heart, this refinement of the heart, and this refinement of the different qualities, and this expression of the different qualities of the divine, the different 99 names, each representing a quality that we embody and that we embrace, and through calling out to it, we call it out from within so that it can open up in us and be be something that is reflected in our being and our personality. And I think that this is what the rules really do for us as well. They really keep us on this path of love and work with the knight to conquer the self through the heart. So before we kind of break off here into, I know we're getting kind of close to time and I want to have a little time to reflect here. But just a couple of thoughts to carry with us as a potential practice through the coming month here. Repeated practice to forge that warrior ethos. So the daily recitation of the 40 rules obviously builds the habit and character, turning intention into custom and custom into the warrior ethos. So the rules as daily tools equip the knight with patience, endurance, faith, and sincerity for every inner challenge. So, this is something that we've been doing in our weekly Sufi group, our SoCal spiritual center here. We have been taking on a rule during our weekly class and working with that rule throughout the week. And so simply starting the practice by choosing one rule that speaks to you and speaking it aloud each morning for the next 30 days and looking for moments to live it. So this isn't really taking on the full practice of the 40 rules. And if you're already on the knighthood path and you're doing a 40 rule, set of 40 rules at the a set of 40 days of a particular rule at this time, this could be an additional thing that you could do, or you could work with the rule that you're at. Or if you're not in the process of working towards knighthood, but you're inspired by these rules, I would urge you to pick a rule that really speaks to you and commit to 30 days of it. And just, over the next 30 days up until the next class, really looking at how that one particular rule speaks to you and what it's forging within you and what it brings forth. And so, this week we talked about overlooking the faults of others and not reproaching others, making them firm in their faults. And I've found some different particular areas where that's kind of opened up for me, some different understanding and experience, just since we spoke it on Tuesday. So I think that these are really just simple ways of picking a rule and working with it and seeing what it can teach us over the course of a period of time, whether it's a week or 30 days or 40 days, simply starting with the practice of one rule. And then the greater path, consistent practice leads to the full 1600-day journey towards knighthood, one day, one rule at a time. So those of us that are working through the rules, either for the first time or the second time, that consistency of practice, really just opens up something. So whether, again, kind of going back to whether it's a week or 30 days or 40 days or, the whole shebang over the course of 1600 days, that constant, consistent practice is something that really leads to a greater experience and unfoldment. And then really looking at the heart of the path. This warrior journey is ultimately one of love, not force. So taking into consideration over the next month the thought of that as we're crafting this warrior ethos within ourselves and we're building this mentality of the guardian of this particular space of understanding and living within ourselves, is to not come at it with force, but to come at it with love. The pure knight conquers through the heart. So this process of these rules being a heart-opening process, just as much as it is a heart-breaking process. We're cracking some things open that sometimes can be painful, but that pain can definitely bring the remedy through. So these are some thoughts of just some ways that you can work with this idea and really craft this warrior ethos over the next month. So at that moment, I would like to just take a quick moment here, just as kind of a closing practice, um, to invite everyone to place your hand over your heart and just repeat, "My conscientious self, harm no one for my own benefit. Meet my shortcomings with a sword of self respect. Observe constancy and love, and hold my ideal high in all circumstances." So this was kind of crafted as a bit of a mantra for the knighthood path. It pulls a little bit from each of the rules and each set, and can kind of be just a nice little phrase to take on. Maybe in the morning, if you don't have a first thing in the morning when your feet hit the ground at the bedside practice. Maybe this could be something that you do. You put your hand over your heart and you repeat this, or at some point in your day, maybe at night before bed. But just calling out to that conscientious self to harm no one for your own benefit, to meet your shortcomings with a sword of self respect, to observe constancy in your love, and to hold your ideal high in all circumstances. I think that these are poignant reminders from each of the rules, and really the key elements that craft that warrior ethos within us. And then, again, having the opportunity to either pick one rule that spoke with you today or after today, and say it out loud every morning for the next 30 days, or this particular practice. But whatever feels right to you, whatever calls to your heart, you can take one of these particular phrases and work with them over the next 30 days to just really focus on crafting that warrior ethos. So that is pretty much what I have for today. And again, on the slides, I always have the rules on here, and so you can kind of walk through those with the deck. And then the crest, I think, is always a great visual for us to really look at the armor that we're building and the swords of self-respect there. And then obviously we have some different links here to some of the different things. So if you're inspired by these to take up the rules, you can reach out to Basira, Kathleen Johnson. She will get you started on those. We also have the Knighthood, the 40 Rules app on the phone. So for both Apple and Android, you can go on and follow along with the rules each day on your phone, get a reminder, and work through them that way. There's the commentary from Zia that's extremely rich, that you can pull from as well. So all these resources, again, are available. So anybody that's kind of new to the class here, all this is available on the slides. And if you go to spiritualliberty.org, you'll scroll down to where you see the Knighthood class, and you'll see some different folder icons at the bottom, and that'll open up these slides. And then there's also a YouTube link at the bottom where these classes, the recordings, are hosted there. So I'll send all that out as a follow-up email to everyone, but wanted to just take a few minutes. I know we're a little over time here, but I wanted to just open it up. If anybody had any questions or comments or any commentary that you would like to add to today's experience, I would love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, Basira.
You might want to, instead of referencing me, you could just say people could email knighthood@inayatiyya.org. And also the structure that we have with the certificates and all that it's really optional. But if you want to do a ceremony and get your sash, this one, you need to go through our structures. That's it. That was a lovely description of the 40 rules. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the distinction there. So yeah, knighthood at inayatiyya.org is the place to aim.
I'm curious about that sash. Is that the orange thing on there? What is that? Oh, wow. That's exciting. Wow.
Yeah, so once you reach the accolade of Knight of Purity and you become knighted in the knighting ceremony, you have this sash that's tied around your waist. And then it's tied in a manner where the end of it is kind of looped as kind of like a link in a chain. So there's three ties that are done at the end that kind of give this link, which I think ties very well to the link of transmission that we have in our silsila. But yeah, the sash is kind of the the armor that you wear, I guess, in a way, once you reach that stage.
I had a couple of comments, a couple things that stood out to me. In Pierzia's commentaries, before he gets into each of the rules, he groups them together and says that he finds that there are some groupings that address different ways that we want to develop. And I picked a group that he grouped on. It has to do with, let me get this paper. So he said that when you study the rules, you find they represent certain themes. And in essence, they're kind of touched on in each of the four groups. And that he's found 7 different ways in which the rules speak to us. So the first one is regarding self-respect, and then rules regarding fair-mindedness, rules regarding fairness, rules regarding good speech, rules regarding duty, others regarding courtesy, and still others regarding generosity. And so what I pulled out became tremendous tools for me, which I recite every morning. I'm almost done with the copper rules right now, but these rules are pulled from the iron, silver, copper, and gold. And you went over a bunch of those today, and I have found them to be so healing because, for example, things like meet your shortcomings with a sort of self-respect, or let not your spirit be humbled in adversity, uphold your honor at any cost, hold your ideal high in all circumstances, and do nothing which will make your conscience feel guilty. This has given me so much so much of a tool to work on myself that just has been a relief, just absolutely a relief. So it says that the foundation of the rules begin with your own relationship to yourself. And so that set of working on yourself seems important. And then the other thing that you mentioned that was so important was the aspect of concentration. And, we were working on concentration in our Tuesday group. And this was staring at that dot was really confronting for people, because you're staring at this dot. You have no idea what you're going to get out of it. You can't imagine how it's going to transform you. And you're being asked to have faith that your mind can't wrap itself around this dot. And yet, what kind of interchange is going to come from that, from doing it? And I don't know, I bent down over my chest of drawers where all my things on the knighthood are located, and I noticed this little book, um, selections from the work of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. This is a really old book that we all probably got back in the 70s. Um, but I just opened it randomly, and this thing on concentration was right there in front of my ideas here, where somebody asked Sri Aurobindo um, to talk about how much we ought to be meditating. And he said, it's not like you have to meditate more. It's really that you need to concentrate more. And concentration does not mean meditation. On the contrary, concentration is a state one must be in continuously, whatever the outer activity. So by concentration, I mean that all the energy, all the will, all the aspiration must be turned towards the divine and her integral realization in our consciousness. So to keep a constantly concentrated, in-gathering attitude is more important than having fixed hours of meditation. And this is what we're doing with the rules of knighthood. It's all about concentrating on these things. And it just, the 40 days is fabulous, but I'm even just thrilled that we're concentrating weekly in our group here in Southern California. So that came up for me, and I'm glad that you brought that up tonight for today.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It makes me think of the phrase inwardly to be with God, outwardly to be with the people.
Mm.
That's a concentration every day to strive towards. Any other thoughts or things that anyone wants to share before we close today?
That was a really powerful summarization for us in summing everything up.
Yes, thank you so much for it. I have so many ahas that it's hard to pick one. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate you all joining today.
As you were going through this, I was thinking I was actually seeing a play of my life where things had come to be, where I had been challenged by something. And I think that's what these rules are all about. It's like a roadmap for our lives. And it was remembering, oh, that challenge and that challenge in life. So I don't know if I'm echoing, am I? Because I'm getting an echo on my own voice.
No.
Anyway, so thank you so much, Sikander. You brought such clarity to this and kind of like circled around and circled back, and it made it very, it shined a light on the work. And I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's yeah, I just felt really, I don't know, I've wanted to do classes again for so long, and music being what led me to Mershid's teachings and everything. I always in my mind for years just assumed that's what I would be teaching and focusing on in classes and things, but something just really called to me about the knighthood activity and the practices, and maybe it's the phase I'm in with, my own martial arts training, and being a 52-year-old, man in a world where, I've had a few opportunities to mentor some other, young guys at work and things like that. It just kind of called to me that there needs to be some focus on this activity, and what these rules can really do. And they've been really transformative for me. So, yeah, just answering the call. So I appreciate everyone else joining me on the journey. So.
Sometimes it's very complex for people to think about joining into our order. But this activity is open to anyone, and it makes sense. What a gift it is when you think about how many people are going through life with no guidepost how to take on all how confronting life is. I'm always trying to talk to young people about it, trying to get some of my own children to want to join in.
I'm wondering about the YouTube. It sounds like you have posted these classes on YouTube. I was thinking particularly that we had indication from Hafisa this week that she had intention to join, but I know it was 6:30 a.m. where she is, and I know I had trouble figuring out how to search on my computer for the link. And I just would like to forward to her the information that she can hook into these classes on YouTube. She has such trouble with her internet connection in Hawaii. So how would you search for the YouTube for this session, for example?
Yeah, so I can send out links both to our text chat and then also through email. But there's a couple ways to find it. If somebody just went on to YouTube and searched for the Alchemy of Knighthood, I have these all grouped in a playlist. So when you see the Alchemy of Knighthood, it'll show a playlist that they can click on, and it'll have all the classes listed there. And then also, if they look up by our center name, SoCal Inayatiyya Center for Spiritual Liberty, they'll find the overall YouTube page there associated with that, and then they'll see the playlist for the knighthood. And then there's also a playlist for Ibn Arabi classes and some classes at Tasneem's and the Caravan of Souls classes that I used to offer at my place. So I kind of have everything sectioned into playlists just to make it a little easier to navigate, and people can see exactly what it is they're going after there.
Oh, I was just going to say, maybe you could send the link a little closer to the actual day, because my last link from you was Thursday, but by then I've got hundreds of emails.
No, that's a good thought. I may do it twice. I may do it towards the beginning of the month, just so people can kind of put it on a calendar and kind of think about it. And then, in the end of that email, just say, I'm going to send this out again the night before, and then Friday night that way. Because some people like to plan ahead and some people like to do it last minute. And so, yeah, that's a good thought. So I appreciate that. Well, I'm going to leave the energy open. So rather than closing with the Hatum, I'm going to let us ride on our horse through the desert, and hopefully we'll end up in that river of love that just flows us on down the stream. So thank you all for joining. I really appreciate your presence and your time and your energy, and for giving space to this. And I hope to see you all next month, and I'll see many of you on Tuesday. So have a lovely weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Sikander. Bye-bye.